All right, Mr. Rick, let's talk about annuals and perennials, because guess what? Folks are ready and anxious to start planting now.
Well, they are, and it's getting to be that time of year.
Yeah.
You know, our last average frost usually is the 15th of April, but a lot of times it's way before that.
Right.
You know, so we're at that time. I think the main thing when you're thinking about planting plants is really pick the site where you're going to grow things.
Okay.
If you think about it, some of the plants I brought today are shade perennials, and of course they bloom early before the leaves are on the trees when they get the most light. And of course, if you just pick the first things that you want and don't think about where they're going to go, you might buy shade plants to put in the sun. And you know, you really don't want to plant most of the annuals till the soil gets a little warmer toward the middle of April.
Okay.
And so, you know, you really have to think about what you're going to plant. So just picking the site is really important.
Okay.
And then the next thing is figure out what's going to grow there. And part of that, also, certain people have color schemes they want in their garden. You know, they want to know, you know, they want something red, white, and blue because of whatever reason, or yellow and purple, or whatever they want. So you need to think about that. And then also bloom times, because plants bloom at different times. There's perennials that bloom in the spring, some that bloom in the summer, some that bloom in the fall, some that are repeat bloomers, but most of them not. And of course, annuals bloom pretty much the whole season, almost from the time you plant them till frost, and most species. So getting the site selected, deciding what it's like. Is it well drained? Is it wet?
That's key these days.
You know, are you going to water frequently when the drought comes in the summer and all these sort of things? So you have to kind of plan for that. Obviously, there's plants that grow in dry sites, wet sites, soggy sites. So, you know, making the proper selection is really important.
Okay.
And then, you know, if you want a nice garden with something blooming all year round, you know, a good tact on that, and this goes in the category of trees and shrubs as well, is to visit a good nursery maybe once a month and see what's in bloom. You know, in our climate, there's things that bloom even in the winter. You know, witch hazels and camellias and a lot of autumnales, cherries, lots of stuff like that, and even like Lenten rose start in February and things like that. So if you pick something out at a nursery every month of the year, you'd pretty much have an all year round garden.
That's pretty good. Think about that before. Okay, all right, makes sense.
And then the other thing I would worry about is proper soil preparation.
Without a doubt.
You know, and it depends what you're going to plant as to how you would amend it, but most of the time you want to be sure that the site is well drained for most things. You want to add some organic matter, the appropriate fertilizer, check the pH, are they acid-loving plants or are they alkaline-loving plants? You know, I see lots of people that try to grow both in the same bed and wonder why some do well and some don't.
That's right. And I'm going to interject here, Mr. D. But soil tests.
Yeah, don't guess soil tests.
Right.
That's right.
Getting your soil tested would definitely help with that plant
agree.
selection for
I
sure.
agree.
Okay.
So those are all things to look for. And then if you're new to gardening, I think a lot of people tend to think too big right away.
Yes.
And they bite off more than they can chew, and then come summertime and it's time to weed and deadhead and all that stuff, and you're worn out. So I think pick the spots very carefully. You know, maybe near the front entrance to your house if you're somebody that works 9 to 5 and that's what you're going to see when you come home from work, or maybe near your deck or patio, or maybe you want to do a series of containers, but I'd locate them close to the house where you're going to apt to see them and water them, because you know in the summer if you forget, they don't last long.
They don't last long at all.
And or maybe a view from a window where you sit in the house and look out when the air conditioning is on, so you can actually see it. You know, but pick your spots carefully and do your most color plantings in those locations, unless you're a real avid gardener or you're retired and you have lots of time and you can do it all.
Right.
You know, so I think those are all important things to look at.
Okay. Now let's define for the folks, what's an annual?
Okay, an annual is a plant that could be grown from seed, or in some cases some tropical plants like lantanas, like here, where they're grown from cuttings. But usually they spend their whole life cycle in one season. So, you know, they flower their hearts out, go to seed, and they die. Okay.
And what about perennials?
Perennials are plants usually that are herbaceous. In other words, they die to the ground in the winter, although there's some exceptions, but they're more like a shrub. But most perennials die to the ground in the winter. They live for a number of years. They flower at a specific time of the year. Some perennials, if you will deadhead them, will bloom more than once. So that means cutting off the spent blooms, of course, so they don't go to seed, because that plant wants to reproduce. And of course, if you can prevent that, it's going to flower again.
Okay. It's good. Good explanation. I like that. Now let's talk about some of the plants that you have here.
Okay. Well, I mentioned that shade perennials were blooming now. You know, also lots of bulbs are blooming now, which you planted in the fall. But the pink flower there is silene, and that's a nice shade perennial. And then in front of it is a blue columbine. Now these are young plants, they're just starting to grow, they're gonna get bigger. And then to the left is a euchera. There are native eucheras with the purple leaf there, a reddish leaf. There are native eucheras in the southeast, but there's lots of hybrids from European varieties crossed with American varieties.
Okay.
And you can get the foliage in almost any color of the rainbow. There's red ones, there's striped ones, there's yellow ones, gold, just many, many shades. And then the plant with the green leaves and the little bell-like flowers that are just forming is a red-leafed form of Solomon seal called ruby slippers, which is a new one. Most of the Solomon seal you see are green-stemmed with the white bells, or there's what they call false Solomon seal, which is variegated foliage, and it looks almost identical to the true Solomon seal.
Okay. Now, you said shade. So what do we mean by shade?
Okay. Shade.
That's always a question we get.
Right. And there's degrees of shade,
and
you can have too much. Okay. If shade is from a tree, you're also competing with tree roots.
Right.
So, you know, your bed preparation there is going to be different than if you're doing a planting in the sun where there aren't tree roots.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So probably if you're planting close to the tree for whatever reason, your best bet is to dig fairly sizable holes. If you've hit a big root, adjust your planting site, amend that soil as well as you can, and plant the plants there.
Okay.
If it's really dense shade, you're best to stay with things that really are not flowering, like hostas. Everybody knows hostas with the colorful foliage. Ferns, of course, will take deep shade. There's other plants that will, epimediums, there's a lot of plants that will really thrive in the shade. If it's moving shade where the little sunlight filters through, a lot of these flowering plants will do really well. The notable thing is that they flower in the spring before the trees leaf out.
Right.
Okay, but they still have to complete their life cycle, so they need some sun to actually, you know, mature and grow flower buds for the following year. So
no, that was good.
Those are degrees of shade.
Good explanation. All right, so what about the other plants that you have?
Okay, that's a bleeding heart, which is also a shade perennial, and the flowers do look a little bit like a heart dangling down, and that's kind of an interesting plant. And again, it just blooms in the early spring, but very nice. Most of the summer and fall blooming perennials are sun plants.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, things like daylilies and phlox and rudbeckias, echinaceas, asters, those are summer and fall blooming. So, you know, by planting correctly, and by that I'm saying in drifts that are kind of mixed, figuring height into consideration, you could have a perennial border that bloomed all year round. But then it's nice to mix a few annuals in there, because by repeating the same annual throughout the bed, you'll have bursts of color the whole season. And that makes a very pleasing effect versus just a big mass of one thing.
How about that? I need you to come to my house and help me out. that sounds
well, I've been doing it for a big space for a long time.
And what do we have here too as well?
These are lantana, very popular plant.
Yes.
You know, it's a butterfly plant, so people like that. The foliage, some people like it and some don't. It's kind of like marigolds. It has a very fragrant smell, which does appeal to some. And this is Kufia. The common name is cigar plant, because you see the little flowers kind of look like that. There's many different forms. There's one called bat-faced Kufia that, if you look at it closely, looks like a little bat's face with the ears. These are long blooming plants. They're technically tropical plants because they're grown from cuttings, but we treat them as annuals, plant them in the spring, let them go till fall. This particular lantana is called Miss Huff, which is pretty much perennial in our climate.
Oh, it is.
It will die to the ground like an herbaceous perennial and then come back from the roots.
Okay.
It helps if you mulch it with a little pine straw, though.
Okay.
Kind of protect it.
Good to know.
Lantanas will grow in hot sun, like in a parking lot where there's asphalt or along a sidewalk, and that's really useful in our climate because that's a tough place to have annual color.
All right.
It's just like you notice that the best pansies that bloom through the winter are in parking lots because they've got all that heat sink from the asphalt and the concrete.
That's why mine looks so good.
But the ones that are out in lawn areas and stuff don't do quite as well because it's colder.
It's cold. All right, okay.
So
makes sense.
Anyway, just you know, you got to look for those little niches in your landscape at home. There's some places where certain things are going to do better than other things, and you just have to figure that out.
About that. Mr. Reed, we appreciate you being here today.
Oh, you're most welcome.
Thank you much. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. To find out more information on this topic, just click on the familyplotgarden.com link in the description.